Hey, good morning, guys. Hope everyone's doing good. It's Sunday, so I just wanted to get the scan out. I've been watching charts now since Friday, and really not a lot is going to change if I'm being honest. But there are a few things that I want to add on to here. And really, I've been talking a lot about Roku and Shop, right? And if you guys don't know, those are part of Kathy Wood's holdings of ARKK, right? They're in the top 10. But ARKK, and I've talked about this for a long time. You guys can go back through either in the Discord or on Twitter if you guys want to hashtag my name or put my name at, and then obviously look up ARKK. I've talked about it. It's been in a cumulative state since 2022. And the chart looks super primed. Once it breaks out of the stage 1 base, I think it'll push like 54. I think it could maybe push back to the 90s. But if we take a look at where it's at versus where some of the charts are at, right? And namely, we talk about Roku, we talk about Shop, which Shop's not even a huge percentage of the weight of the ETF itself. But those names have so much more room to go. Those will be on the watch list or the scan, so don't worry, I will cover those. But we can take a look at some of these other names to see if there's laggers that carry a little bit more weight in the ETF. And that's kind of what I did this week. I still love Roku. I think Roku has so much more room to go. But if you take a look at Coin, I still think Coin needs a little bit of downside. It's hard though because some of these other names in the crypto space do look great. Riot looks probably the best out of the miners. I don't really like Mara as much. I know that's gotten a lot of hype over the weekend. A lot of people are posting that. It's still a little bit hard to trade. There's not really a clear pivot. There's a lot of downside or drawdown that you would experience if you actually want to take it before support. So it's a weird one. So I probably really won't watch like the crypto names. I still think coin needs to come down, guys. I really do. I'll show that chart here at the end once I kind of edit around this. But if anything, I think Riot or Mara would be the one to take. But MSTR, if you guys didn't know, had a huge break last week. I really didn't want to trade that one. It was a bit spready. You guys know me. I really don't like to trade crypto names that well unless it's like a clear defined risk entry with risk and then a clear reward. That one got a little bit tricky in my opinion. It was like a breakout over 187, I want to say, or 181. I really don't like to take those breakout trades, but yeah, and then if you guys take a look, right, crypto, I mean, or Bitcoin itself, really could break out any given day, any given week. Elections are coming up in about 2 weeks or so, so things are starting to get primed. So I definitely want to keep these on watch for specifically talking about crypto-related names. But right now, I'm going to put Coin kind of on the back end. I'll maybe have it on a side chart along with Mara and Riot. But really, Roblox is the one I want to talk about. Roblox, I've talked about that one being obviously in a cumulative state as well, and it had that nasty breakout. Now it's pulling back and really basing that previous resistance, and it's holding it really well. I'll show you guys that here, but I really like Roblox here. I think this can be a big contributor towards ARKK, having that big move that we're expecting. If you guys didn't see, Palantir made all-time highs again, so big Palantir move. But Block is another one that I want to talk about. SQ, this chart looks really good. I saw some people talking about this one, not a lot, but I was looking at SQ a long time ago. I think it was back in like, I want to say like January, February, and it worked out really well. And then I started to not look at it as much once it started to have lower highs being formed out. And I think there was like a nasty gap down on it, and I just stopped watching it. But Block looks incredibly good. So just to kind of bring things back together, from what I'm looking at, Roblox, Roku, SQ are definitely going to be on the watch list. Hood, if you guys remember, I had a position way back. I took November 15th, $25 calls. I remember I got like a really good gain on those, and I trimmed down, and then I ended up getting stopped out on like whatever I had left. But I still have shares on this one. Hopefully you guys have shares with me. This has a great chart as well. This just made a new high. This thing looks really good to keep pushing to 30. I might keep my eyes on this one as a replacement for Coin, right? Coin's chart doesn't look as good. I think Robinhood could actually be a good supplementary position to take place of Coin if we are going to trade something crypto related. Although I've talked about the how that's almost kind of unpaired from the Bitcoin narrative, right? Bitcoin doesn't have to do something crazy for Hood to do something crazy. Hood could just do its own thing, and it's become very independent, which I really like about Robinhood. And then let's talk about Shopify. I mean, Shopify is obviously a candidate as well. Although it doesn't have the biggest weighting here, this chart still looks good, right? So what I want to get into is ARKK. clearly accumulating, clearly looks good to go, but when is it going to go? But if we take a look at a lot of these holdings, a lot of these individual names, these have such a great opportunity to break out and really contribute towards that big pop that we should see on ARKK. Obviously, Tesla is the biggest weight, and that one's potentially has some downside, but some of these other names could really lift the ETF up. So if we jump into charts now, I really want to talk about Roku. I want to talk about Roblox. I want to talk about SQ, Hood, and Shop. And those are going to be honestly some of the primary focuses this week for me because I think they play out rather quickly. I still like semis, don't worry. I'll be looking for pullbacks on those, but I should have a good enough position in a lot of those. INTC, LRCX, MU. And AMD, obviously, I have those runners left. I have the last 5 contracts. But it's good to have a pivot idea here for a potential rotation, and I think that's going to start now. So ARKK for reference, guys, if you take a look, right, I mean, this thing was at its prime, its glory days way back in the 150s. It started to have lower highs. It had a clear break of structure underneath this level here, right, underneath 96, and then it started to sell, right? We started to sell. We caught a nice little pivot here off 54. We had a nice bounce, still a lower high, sold down, retested. But since then, we've pretty much been in this range. And if we take a look, some of the highest volume that occurred ever for ARK was actually this stopping candle here, or this footprint candle is what I would like to call this. But it started on May 9th, 2022. I would argue that this is the end of one campaign, right? The end of the selling and the beginning of a new campaign, right? Which is the buying. And it's been doing that ever since. And we had a lot of the volume really occur all the way till like March of 23. And then it started to get a little bit stagnant. You guys can see there's still volume here, but it's not really occurring in the ETF itself anymore. And if you take a look at a lot of these individual names, that's when we can go to those shops. We can go to Roku. We could take a look at some of these names, Roblox even, and we can see the accumulation happening there, whereas we don't really see it on the ETF itself. And we haven't really broken out since then either. But this chart looks pretty freaking good now, right? We kind of escaped this little range here, and we're starting to make higher lows. You guys can see we have weekly low here, weekly higher low here. It kind of tied into this range. Then weekly higher low here. Right, and now we're kind of pressing against our EMAs here. We could get a pop, right? And the reason that we could get a pop, and that's why I want to jump into some of these charts here, Shop still has a ton of room in my opinion. I can clean this chart up just a little bit, but once again, this doesn't need to have high volume to press out. A lot of that volume that occurred was these footprint candles here, right? You guys can clearly see this was when it had that first markdown, and then it had that lower low that was made to fill the gap here at 48, if you guys remember. And then really, footprint candle here. These were accumulations in my opinion. You can see this a lot better on the daily, but I'm using the weekly to kind of reference it, right? This was really the big position holding or position fills that ended up being call side, long side on equity, right? And then it had that big markup from the earnings. It pressed through this lower high became support. Now it's pressing back again, right? And all you really care about are these breakouts through the resistance zones on high volume to kind of make sure the chart's still healthy. And really, like, I just want to emphasize this still has room, right? Remember I said I don't really like to trade gaps when there's like not much juice worth the squeeze and the risk is not like proportionate to the reward. This still has about, in my opinion, 8% on that. So this is still a good chart. I would prefer if it did reject the gap and maybe retest this old lower high here, like 77, and then press out, then give us this move here. But this chart, either way, like I want to emphasize, has a ton of room. It's not the biggest weight holding in ARKK, but this chart has a ton of room still. I want to keep this on watch above 83.50, or if it can sell off, right? I don't think this high is really important. If it can sell off and hold 77, I think that's prime time entry. But Shop has to be on watch, guys. It literally has to be on watch. And that ties me into the second thing here. This is going to be Roku. This is the number 2 weighted holding in the ARKK ETF, right? Now, I already kind of drew out what I think and what I would like to happen. I would prefer if sellers actually stepped in here and rejected the 78.37 gap, and we actually sold. Ended up coming all the way back down to this gap here at 72.48. We got a lower high, and then it sold again, filled the gap, pushed back out above 72.46, reclaimed 72.46, and then started its uptrend again. Picture perfect world. I would love if that happened. I would go so heavy into this trade, but you got to think this will probably be like 2 weeks, right? You got to realize that each one, like, we'd have multiple days of downside. We'd have to wait for it to bounce. We'd have to wait for a lower high. We'd have to wait for it to sell again to 70. This could take 2, 3, 4 weeks, 2 months. Who knows how long this would take? This is ideal situation. And there's always that, that kind of like urge to, hey, once it breaks above this spot, I want to take calls, right above the 78.61. And that's why I always go light on these ones, guys, when you have a downside kind of target like this with that low volume like that. Any given moment, supply could run out, right? And then they would just sell and then rebid lower, right? To reinvigorate the chart. And then obviously get better fills, trap anybody on the upside here. And yeah, I mean, that's literally how this works. So I would be very, very hesitant, but if I did take it above 78.61, I mean, that wouldn't be bad to even have with small size, and you got to realize that if you have small size on this one and you're able to take like 2, 3 cons, let's say just baby size, that's a 15% move on the underlying there, just to get to the daily gap fill. It's about $12. That should pay rather well, but right, I would probably, if I do get a position up here, I would likely go pretty far dated. I don't know exactly what contracts I would take, but I would want to grab time. I wouldn't go super heavy with short dated, because there is that potential. It kind of just does this, right, where we end up getting this sweep here where it looks like it's going to close and then it dips under, does this, and then it starts to do exactly what I drew out here. So this chart, I want to say I would love to take more on a break over 78.61, but I can't. I would prefer this ends up selling down to 72.46, gives us a lower high, breaks down to 70.20, reclaims 72.46, right, and then ends up moving all the way up to 78.61. It should look feel a little familiar to crowd, where a crowd ended up breaking underneath that key support, kind of pushed to this lower gap, held the top of the gap, pushed back above, held and reclaimed this progression gap, closed above the high here on that hourly that I talked about, and then it had that huge launch, right? So it kind of should give that same feel where we want to see it kind of break down into this gap, fill the top. Maybe it could bounce off the top, but this level could be technically absorbed, right? So maybe a bounce off of that, comes down, get fills here, push out, and get fills here, and then watch it kind of trace back up. But yeah, that's going to be a big watch for me on Roku. I want to talk as well about SQ, guys. SQ chart looks pretty damn good as well. We kind of have like an internal external kind of work in here. I've had this charted out for a long time, if I'm honest. I deleted some of this stuff, but I still had this level for some reason. I don't know what it is, but very easy in my opinion. A lot of these charts have the same thing where we have this like 3 higher low forming out, and really, right, we had bread and butter system. We're an internal range, lower high / resistance. You guys can clearly see this was resistance here, kind of made a lower low. It pushed up, rejected, higher low, pushed up, rejected, higher low, and then it finally broke, right? So this is a key spot. If we can get a pullback to 68.39, or even kind of like right around Friday's low to give us like an inside bar here, just to visually depict that. Just we have this break here. I would like to see us just like either pull back or just do something like this, right? I think we can get a nice move up to 73.36, which would be that external high, at least from a weekly perspective, a daily perspective, up into that 73.36. So 73 calls or 72 calls would be prime. If we can get an entry right around here, right? I mean, this is a 7% move. It's right around $5 if we got like a perfect entry. So I'm going to be watching SQ. I think this chart has a long, long way to go still. I think this could start pushing into this spot up here, back up here, right around 81.46. But just bit by bit, right, I think this can push to 73. Weekly chart on this does look good as well. That's always a plus. I mean, this thing has been grinding nonstop. And you guys can clearly see that pivot point a lot better, right? On the weekly chart, clearly weekly rejections and just higher lows forming against that. And we'd be targeting this weekly high here. So pretty simple. SQ is going to be on watch along with Roku Shop. And then Hood, another good one. I talked about this one though. It's a little bit tricky, right? I mean, we did make a higher high. If you guys remember, this was the old entry back here. We ended up kind of closing majority here, and then whatever I had left got stopped out on this move down here. But yeah, ever since then, really nice, very similar to the rest of the stuff. That August 5th low, higher low, kind of broke above the progression gap here, consolidated and then ripped. This still has room, in my opinion, guys, all the way up here. This looks like free trading. I don't want to say free trading, but it looks like open grounds to keep going to 33.30, right? Somewhere in that range. So if we can get like a pullback and just a retest of this high, I know it technically did it here with these two bars from Wednesday and then Thursday, but if it can just give us a structural pullback, I think that that would be a good opportunity to add into some 33, maybe 30 calls for a couple months out. And it does get a little risky. Earnings are on the 30th, but I think it would be okay. I don't really think there's any imbalances to the downside that need to be filled. Everything looks pretty good from a daily perspective. So this chart honestly gets really simple now. We can start deleting some of these things and cleaning up the chart. I mean, there is a gap way back here, guys, but I don't think that that would need to be filled, right? I mean, there's weird potential that it could move all the way to 12, but I don't see that happening, right? I think this is going to keep pushing out. So yeah, this is going to be a big one, up to 33. So I'd watch for a pullback to 24.81, just that previous high. This is a good opportunity. Once again, if you guys need to see the target on the weekly, it's literally like IPO prices, right? The IPO low. So pretty insane to see how these bases play out, guys. Once again, these bases all play out the same way, where you have these bases, you end up kind of getting a pop up into these weekly highs, you get a higher low that's formed there, the EMAs start to tighten, and then you get a breakout, and usually it ends up retesting the old resistance, which would be like right around here. You guys can clearly see you got pretty close. But yeah, these are fantastic charts. These are all kind of setting up the same. And then the last one that I want to talk about was Roblox. This is going to be a huge focus for me as well. If you guys have been watching this with me for a while, I mean, I've been talking about this one for so long, and it's been dragged out. But really, I mean, this has been trading like in this box for a long time, but it's clearly developed an internal range resistance, which is this 47 spot. We haven't really moved up to this 53.88. We can maybe like push this down here a little bit to this like 52. 53 is just your general range of resistance once we can clear 47. But the key is, right, we're now starting to form higher lows, very similar to a lot of the charts off this this May, or this, I think it was the August. This is the August 5th low. Yeah, okay. This was actually May, but so you guys can see pretty much the same look as everything else. But we had this higher low trend line kind of forming. We had a drop here from the I think it was the Heisenberg short report, which are always bullshit. It ended up selling down, and we got a footprint candle, right? A clean footprint candle that somebody definitely entered in here. And it really just kind of protected this old resistance that was inside of this this box that we've been trading in, right? Clearly, a nice little resistance off that 40.80. It sold down underneath that, got claimed back above and closed above, and we obviously still held that higher low trend line. And we had a really clean weekly volume, really clean daily volume. Everything looks primed for this to kind of continue and shoot up, right? Kind of move back up to this 47 spot. So I'm going to be watching for 47 calls, right? 47, maybe 50 calls. Maybe we get lucky and ends up ripping through 47 and gives us this pullback here where we end up getting something like this up into that 53. But once again, this chart is primed, guys. This is one of those stocks that still has a ton of room and hasn't really traded to its gap yet. We've talked a lot about some of these names where Hood's already at highs. SQ has potential to kind of push to the 84 or whatever that spot was. I think SQ is like a little bit behind, similar to the Roblox, but yeah, I mean, you guys can clearly see has a little bit of room to go, but if you take a look at Shop, right, Shop's already kind of pressing its gap at the highs. If you take a look at Roku, it's already kind of pressing its gap near these, I wouldn't say highs necessarily, but it's pushing towards this gap in this range high. So this Roblox itself still has a ton of room to really still build out, and I want to be able to catch this one. So I think 47 calls are what I'm going to be watching this week against 40.80, and I think risk would honestly be this footprint candle low. It makes a ton of sense to just have that volume kind of be your support and really force them to make a new low underneath 37.50. So I don't know the exact contracts. I'll probably post them in the pre-market chat, what I'm going to be looking at and what I'm going to be adding to my watch list. But yeah, 47 calls, maybe like a couple weeks out, a couple months out. We'll see what I end up doing. But yeah, this is going to be a big focus for me. All right, and I want to conclude this here, and then I'm going to go ahead and clip it all together. And then what I'll do is I'll jump into semis, because semis are still a big focus for me. And really, guys, the main reason I'm going over some of the new stuff is because some of these other things are going to start dropping off, simply because they're going to targets, and I kind of feel like these trades may be done. That is talking directly about Crowd. AMD should be next, but Crowd clearly broke out. It's pushing this gap fill here at 320 now, and it looks super, super good. The only thing I think that could happen is maybe we get another opportunity where it retraces and retests this 300 breakout, albeit this is very unlikely, but more likely scenario is it just kind of pulls back and holds this 316.75 gap right here, and then has that continuation up into 342 to 336. There is another roll that's available here off 316.75, although I don't really think that this is really worth it, right? This thing has gone on a crazy, crazy move here. I would prefer if this kind of sold down either into 300, maybe we get like a low high type flag here just off of 316, maybe it kind of sells down a little bit. It lets the 9 and 20 EMA catch up to it because this is pretty extended here. But this trade is almost done. There's just a couple scenarios that I think that we could roll and just squeeze out a little bit more juice on this one. But for the most part, Crowd should roll off here in the next coming days or weeks. AMD, very similar situation. This has a pretty nice box range, honestly, where we have this 162 level now acting as support. And like I said, I think that this could either gap up into 169.80, but this trade is virtually done, right? I think this just goes up to 176.80, and I think we get a pop up, maybe a roll here off 169.80. Although once again, I think that this isn't really worth the risk versus the reward you're getting, but could do something like that. But that's really going to be the two that fall off here shortly, Crowd and AMD, and I wanted to have replacements for those, and I felt like ARKK, some of those names in there, aside from Roku and Shop, look very, very good and are very worthy candidates, if you will, to be able to take following positions. Now, if we look at Micron still looks really good. I've talked about this one. I talked about this, I believe, on Friday for the recap. Or I don't even know if I did a recap. I might have done that in my brain. But still, once again, I don't really want to add until we get to like 95.77. I don't want to go super heavy into this one. But this one looks good if it can get another pop, maybe a gap up, or just kind of a resistance break on harmonic volume through 108.78. This is this old resistance here, as you guys can clearly see. And if we can just kind of rest on that, develop some support against that zone, I think the nether ads are viable somewhere off of this spot here, right? We can roll contracts, maybe go out to like 130 calls for like November, or I wouldn't say October anymore, but like late November, maybe roll to like 135 calls for December. Just some kind of roll would be available there. And then still obviously hold our core position that we have currently. But yeah, that wouldn't be a good add until above 108.78 or a pullback back to 95.77. So that's still on watch for me. That's probably my main focus right now in terms of semis and just getting quality ads on that one. LRCX still looks really good, Lam Research. This looks kind of similar to Marvell, if you guys know that, or Marvel. Very similar, where it has this support kind of forming out here. Multiple days and weeks off the 71.47, but I think LRCX looks a little bit better. Pretty obvious targets as well, right? We've talked about the accumulation that was happening prior to their split. Now that their split happened, I expect volume to drop off and this just to kind of mark up. But yeah, remember the ads were off of this 80 zone. We pushed to the top of this old progression gap at 83. If we just want to see this turn 83 into support and kind of close over it with a couple daily candles, or just create some kind of separation, maybe it does something like this, where it creates separation, then pulls back, and then starts to trade up to that 89.50 level, which is this lower high. So pretty easy spot to kind of gauge where this chart will start to have some success and is really validating, would be this 89.50 spot. And then from there, right, these contracts have a lot of time. So expecting a push to 101.92 and 106, right? So plenty of rolls available on this one as well. Maybe it gets a pop out. We can add on the pullback there for new ones. So don't take this one off kind of your radar just yet. And then obviously that's pretty much it, guys. LRCX, Micron or MU, AMD, Crowd are kind of fall off here shortly. And once QQQ, guys, we're basically there. Once QQQ hits this this 496 level, I think that I'm going to stop watching this. I mean, it could be on watch for like a downside move. We have a ton of dark pool prints to the downside, namely at like 481, but there's that big one at 471. I think that we could still potentially get a dip into the elections, or because of the elections. So I might watch QQQ for a short. off of this like 496. I think this could be top, or maybe we push to the all-time high, and it doesn't even give us an opportunity. I don't know, but I will kind of just keep this on side watch for a short back down to that 471 level. But that's really it, guys. I want to conclude it there. A lot of stuff, but for the most part, right, like I said, crowd and AMD will drop off. So eventually what we'll have is like this all coming to the top here, and then these two, right, kind of just dropping off down here. So the focus would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 charts on watch. QQQ more than likely will drop to like a secondary as well. So really it would be MU, LRCX, Roblox, SQ, Shop, Roku, right? And then we could potentially add in, as I said before, you could throw Hood in there for like a main watch as well, or if you guys prefer, I always kind of give the option for it, but like Coin could take that place, or Mara. But yeah, once again, I don't really like the miners that much. If anything, I'm going to trade Riot. I think Riot looks a little bit better, especially through this high here, which is from Monday the 7th, right? I think if we can get through that, you can easily push up to 10, right? So at that point, you can get a nice move there for about 20% on the underlying. But we'll see what ends up happening. But that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you guys were there with me through crowd, through AMD. Roku, Shop, I mean, we've taken all these guys. MU's still like 30%, so a lot of successful trades, and a lot of stuff I've been kind of pounding the table on for a while now, and they're all kind of starting to play out. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoy. I will see you guys on Monday.